All right, we had some technical difficulties, and thank you for being here. I'm excited. I'm AJ McMahon. Had some technical difficulties that kept us from continuing with our start at 7:45 a.m. And I'm excited to jump back in. We're going to continue with our series today, part 4 of this 5-part series in understanding ADHD as it is, not as we have been told or want it to be. I'm excited for part 4, development and disorder. Please hear me, not developmental disorder, development and disorder. Let's dive in. We're we're on this journey of understanding kids 12 and under. And when we look at this, we're going to start with a story of a friend of mine who, when she was around 12 years old, her parents adopted an infant child. This child was just a few months old, and as they grew up together, she would take care of her brother for a couple of hours after school. So she would pick him up from a daycare close to the house, take him home, watch him until the parents got home. And when the parents got home, they would have their family time. When the boy, the son, the brother, yep, all those different terms were, when he was around 1 years old, he started to walk, but he would only walk when she would take care of him. And during that time, because when the parents got home, he would flop on the floor as he heard the car pull up and them walking up to the door. He would flop on the floor, and that would be his posture till they scooped him up in his arms and took care of him all night. She would exclaim that he could walk, but the parents had never seen it, never experienced anything like it, so they didn't believe her. Well, one day one of the parents came home early, and the son, the brother, I feel weird calling the boy, but the her brother didn't hear the parent come up to the door early. So when the parent walked in or opened the door, he was in mid stride, mid walk, turned around, saw the parent, dropped on the floor, and the gig was up. It was at that point they knew that he could walk. He was enjoying being held and carried all night. So even though he had ability, he did not display it with the parents because of the treasures that he was able to experience when they got home. How many of you have had experience with a child where you've seen them do things or maybe caught them in a way, not in a bad way, not that they were doing something bad. However, you caught them doing something that in other ways or other areas, it did not seem like they were able to do. You know, our children, they start to figure us out when they are, I would say, about 6 to 8 months old. And you can see the little games that children will play or things they will do even before they can talk. And this is highlights their intelligence. And because of this, they are now operating in a way where they are understanding their world to them and how their world impacts them. We're going to talk about a secret ingredient because one thing that I've seen, I'm AJ McMahon, and I have had the privilege of working with thousands of families. And in my time working with families, I've been able to see that when a family structure can have a few different kids, so two, three, or more kids, that the kids can operate very differently in the same family structure. So I think about this when it comes to cookies. Now, when you have a batch of cookies, you mix that up. What are your favorite cookies? Well, when you mix up a batch of your favorite cookies and you put them in the oven, those are the cookies that come out. When you mix up oatmeal cookies and oatmeal raisin, put them in the oven, what comes out? Oatmeal raisin. Chocolate chip, the same thing. Sugar cookies. However, when it comes to a family, you can have the same batch of dough, but the cookies can come out different, meaning that the kids can be very different from one another, even though they're basically in the same environment. And in that, we get to see, and this reveals the truth of inner temperament. As I was trying to understand kids and what causes them to have the challenges that they have, one thing that struck me was how kids are operating differently in the same environments. And we are told and led to believe in my field of psychology that it has to do with disorders in the brain, that you can have one child that is quote unquote normal and they are functioning well in society and relationships and their interactions and behavior and transitions. And you can have another child who can be the opposite of that, that this has something to do with the brain. Well, I was able to come across the New York longitudinal study, which talked about inner temperament. And there was a 30-year study, and you can look up information about this online, where they wanted to understand kids and they found inner temperaments that basically most of the kids fell into one of three categories of inner temperament. Inner temperament is how we as individuals are motivated from within. We talk a lot about personality, don't we? You hear a lot about a child's personality. What we don't talk about is a child's temperament. And just like personality can be a natural part of who they are, temperament is also. The three temperaments that they found in the New York longitudinal study were the compliant temperament, the what they called slow to warm up temperament, and the difficult temperament, which Dr. James Dobson coined the strong willed temperament. Many of you have heard of the strong willed temperament. Many of you even will say that your kid is strong willed. Well, what does it mean for children to have these different temperaments? In my opportunity to understand kids, I developed this chart. Now, a lot of this information is taken from the New York longitudinal study and has my own twist on it. So, children with the compliant temperament. Now, again, any of these temperaments talk about how children, and we're focusing on 12 and under, how they're motivated from within. So, this has nothing to do with your parenting, the environment, what they've been through. This is talking about a natural internal motivation that children have from within themselves. Children that have the compliant temperament are motivated to please the boss. Children that operate with the slow to warm up temperament are internally motivated to not upset the boss. And children that operate with the strong will temperament at the forefront are motivated to be the boss. So when children are operating with these temperaments, I look at them as these three temperaments. And most of the time, I find that children operate with a combination of the temperaments, more like a primary temperament and then a secondary temperament. And most of the time, the tertiary temperament, I don't see that show up so much. So, for example, you can have a child that operates primarily with the strong willed temperament and they want to be the boss. And you see this primarily with parents. However, they might go to another setting, like say with a coach, and now you see them listening to the coach, following directions, following through a task, operating in a way that's not the same as how they may operate at home or with the parents or in a different setting. And basically, what's happened is in that environment for the child, they're pushing their secondary temperament, the compliant temperament, where they're trying to please the boss, to the forefront. So see this as basically how they're motivated from within. And let's talk about some of the characteristics of these temperaments. The compliant children that operate with the compliant temperament, they're rule followers, they're pleasers and achievers, they're frustrated when others don't follow the rules. Their major strength is responsibility. What they struggle with from a mental health perspective oftentimes are symptoms of anxiety and depression. Children that operate with a slow to warm up temperament, they don't want to upset the boss. These children can also be called shy children. But these children, they don't like making waves. They warm up slowly socially. They often, especially at first, kind of avoid the spotlight. They're typically extremely perceptive to the feelings and emotions of others. These children, their major strength is that they're self sufficient. They often go unnoticed. They can be called the lost child. And their major struggles from a mental health perspective can be symptoms of depression and also feeling like a burden. Strong strong-willed, or as called in the I can't talk today. In the New York longitudinal study, strong-willed children, they want to be the boss. They're internally motivated from within to want to do what they want to do. They use their high intelligence to have life on their terms. They want others to play how they want to play, and they get upset when they have to do things they don't want to do. They lack motivation when it comes to things that they should do. These children, their major strength is independence, and their major struggle from a mental health perspective is symptoms of just about every childhood disorder imaginable. So, what is happening with children? Well, let's talk about that because children are operating from this secret ingredient, their own temperament. So, what you're seeing in a family of three, for example, you may have one child who's operating primarily with the compliant temperament. All right, let's just say, for example, and kind of tie this in a little bit with birth order, although it's not, they're not approximate matches, but some of you are familiar with birth order, so we kind of tie it in. Let's say that the oldest child is operating with the compliant temperament. They want to please the boss. The middle child is operating with the slow to warm up temperament. They don't want to upset the boss. And the youngest child is operating with the strong willed temperament. Now, a lot of times it can seem like the youngest child has some kind of developmental disorder, but 98 to 99% of children in America do not have some kind of developmental disorder. What they have is disorder in their lives due to development. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about that. So, what you have is these children that are operating differently based on inner temperament. And when it comes to a child that is operating primarily with the strong-willed temperament influencing them, you're going to see them have all kinds of struggles with transition, struggles with following through with tasks, listening and doing what they're supposed to do. They're going to have emotional outbursts. They're going to have trouble with any of these different things. They're the ones that ultimately get to that point where they are climbing out of the window, banging their head on the ground, attacking their siblings. These behaviors that seem so out of control and that concern us. How does this occur? You can also look up information about brain development, which is very key when we look at development. Part 4, development and disorder. Well, it starts with development. When it comes to children 12 and under, their brains are developing. The brain, as far as I can understand from what I've been able to uncover in looking into brain development, the brain is developing basically from back to front. Okay. So, in this developmental process, the primary parts of our brain that are in control when we're 12 and under are the rear parts of the brain that have to do with impulses and emotions. Do you know any children that might have challenges with impulses and emotions that are 12 and under? Well, as the brain developments, as the, excuse me, as the brain develops, the final part of the brain to fully develop when we're in our mid 20s is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for impulse control, mood regulation, and judgment, which is the final part of the brain to develop when we're in our mid 20s. It's very interesting to me. I don't know if this is still the case, but when I grew up, insurance for boys would drop when they're 25. So if you had a car, insurance was high. But at 25 years old, the insurance rates would drop because across the board, they were finding that around 25 years old, boys would be much more responsible in their driving. I think there's a connection there with brain development, which the prefrontal cortex, when it's fully developed around our mid 20s, is responsible for, say it with me, impulse control, mood regulation, and judgment. Do you know any children 12 years old and under that have struggles with those things? Yes, because that part of the brain is not dominant. Dr. Laura Rubin said that parents are basically a pseudo prefrontal cortex for their children. So we are meant to help them regulate because they don't have the strength to regulate on their own. Part of not having the strength comes from character development. Part of the reason that God put them in our care until they're about 18 or longer is because we're trying to also help them develop character. Character development comes in two specific ways. Okay, two, two specific ways. Whoop, whoop. This is for. Don't worry, not getting mad. Don't worry about that. Okay, if you can't see the video, then you didn't see the one hand was holding up two fingers, other hand was holding up two fingers, but that's what was going on. Let's just move on. Okay, so two ways that character develops: self-discipline and self-control. These are natural factors, but we don't talk about them, and we need to. Self-discipline, as a mentor of mine shared, is our ability to make ourselves do what we ought to do regardless of how we feel. Think about this from a child's perspective. Do you know any children? What children do you know have trouble pushing their energy into doing certain things regardless of how they feel? Well, that comes from the development of self-discipline. Self-control is our ability to pull ourselves away from anything that we might want to put our energy into that can be detrimental or destructive, such as hitting, running around, or impulsive behaviors, banging the head on the floor, other things like that, throwing books around the classroom. These are things, or even children just walking away from you, doing their own thing when you tell them not to. So, what we as parents or caregivers or even professionals get an opportunity to do to recognize how these three components are powerfully impacting kids. How are they primarily motivated from within with their inner temperament? To understand that pretty much all kids, 98 to 99% of children across the board have the same brain development. But because of how they are powerfully motivated from within, according to their inner temperament, to operate in line with their world and particularly the boss, that is what is creating the differences. Not the difference in their development, but their temperament. And so you've got one child who's in the class operating with the compliant temperament, who's sitting at the front of the class, who wants to learn, who wants to please, who wants to get in line, who wants to follow directions because they're internally motivated from within to please the boss. You've got this other child who's kind of sitting off to the side or maybe in the back, and they're quiet and they're not saying much and they're not really getting in trouble, but they're also not being noticed because they don't want to upset the boss. You've got another child who is going wild and not wanting to sit still and wanting to get up and not wanting to listen and have trouble or can seem depressed or shut down because they want to be the boss, and they're going to either put their energy into the things that they want to do or not put their energy into things that they don't want to do. And this is what is occurring. And when we get to understand kids and how these things work together and how they fit together, we get an opportunity to also look at it from the character development. The answer is development, because the disorder is not in their brains, it's in their lives, because we are not given the accurate information about children and what is happening from the developmental perspective. So when we look at the combination of inner temperament, brain development, and then character development, we get to understand that our goal is to be able to help them overcome the disorder in their lives by helping them develop their character, by building them up. Character. Now, we're not just talking about the examples of character that you're setting by making good choices, loving them, attending to them, taking care of them. Because if it was up to that to make the most difference, we wouldn't need these videos and this series and this opportunity together, because they would be doing well. And many of you are baffled because you're like, I give them attention, I take care of their needs, I'm there for them every day, I don't understand. And one of the common myths is that children are acting up for attention, but that's oftentimes not what it is. It's more so that they're operating in line with their temperament, and the strong-willed temperament. They want to be the boss. They want to have life on their terms. So Temperament can be shaped when we get accurate information, when we understand kids from a developmental perspective, when we can give them what they need, which is accountability and lovingly firm discipline, when we operate as parents, not as their friends, but when we operate as parents in line with giving them the structure that the basically we are that pseudo prefrontal cortex. Remember, the prefrontal cortex is responsible for what? Three things: impulse control, mood regulation, and judgment. So, this is the expectation of the child to control their impulses, to regulate their mood, and to make judgments that are healthy and effective. But they need help with that. The problem is we have expectations for them that they're not strong enough yet to carry out. It's not that they're not able, they're just not strong enough over their impulses and emotions. Again, remember the back part of the brain responsible for impulses and emotions. So they can tell us that they're going to do good, they want to do good. But when they get in that moment as choice and consequence learners and they are in this immediate situation, they crumble. Think about us as adults. How many times will we have intentions to go to the gym, but we don't? We have intentions to take that walk or to eat that healthy meal or to refrain from that activity that's not very good for us. And we give into it over and over. And we have developed brains and we have developed more structures and we struggle with these things. How much more do children 12 and under? What they need for us is to help them to build up their self discipline through loving accountability, to be able to go through the LEAP process, which I outline in my books. And you can check out by connecting with powerofable.com. And you can look at this information. And that's all I want you to have is the information to empower you to put together your own plan that's going to empower your child to develop their self-discipline, that they can do what they ought to do regardless of how they feel. And when they build up that muscle, their temperament is shaped, that they can have a primary strong-willed temperament, but they can be encouraged in this method of accountability, love, accountability, and healthy, firm, effective discipline. Yes, discipline. That's what they need. Think about any training. How does that come? Our training comes through discipline, disciplining our minds, bodies, our spirits, putting down that phone, taking that walk, eating that healthy meal, making a plan. These things are tough, but we discipline ourselves to pray, to commit ourselves to healthy relationships, healthy mindsets. These are things that take discipline. And when we discipline ourselves, this is how we grow. Children, yes, not barbaric, need healthy, affirming, loving discipline to empower them to push their energy away from the things that they may feel like or want to do into what they need to do. And that is the development of self-discipline, for them to not put their energy into the things they feel like doing and into the things that are healthier for them, which is the development of self-control. And when we are tenacious and persistent in our belief in our child's ability, and we empower them from a developmental perspective to push their energy into the healthy, loving expectations that we have for them through the lovingly firm accountability and discipline. And they are pushing their energy away because they want to avoid the consequences and they want to push their energy into the better choices because that's how we're guiding them. And then when they do that, they feel empowered, they feel better. That's why, believe it or not, past the initial things where they want to fight against you, children get excited. Children get excited because they know this is exactly what they need. And when they're given what they need, they may not like it at first, but they know it's good for them. It's like eating their emotional, mental, behavioral vegetables, right? So we're going to do that. Let's empower the kids, but you be empowered. And thank you for being a part of this series today so we can understand that it is not likely your child is disordered, but the disorder in your lives is real. And we get an opportunity to, even if we're using psychotropic drugs for a time, for you to go through a process of empowerment that can help your child develop the skills, the characterological strengths necessary in self-discipline and or self-control to empower them to overcome whatever disorders in their lives. This is the key. Now, here's one of the focuses. You only want to help them to develop in one area at a time. So self discipline might come in the form of listening. You will do what I tell you right away. Self control might come in the form of something like you will not hit. Now, we're going to get into other things and and other things. Spanking, appropriate, loving, healthy spankings do not teach your child to hit. It doesn't. Now, I just want to put that in because it's one of the things that we're going to cover. Not because I'm saying that you need to spank your kids. What you need to do, well, no, not what you need to do. You don't need to do anything except for hopefully love God, have the best life possible, and all that. But anyway, sorry getting off on tangent. But hear my heart on this. My heart is for you, and my heart is for you to have the experience of transformation that you're meant to have, and to pass that on to whatever child or children that you have been entrusted with. So, in that, what do you need for that? So that you can have the opportunity to equip them in one specific area at a time, whether it's self discipline or self control. So stay with me, stay tuned, stay connected. Let's continue in this journey. When I fumble around, hear my heart. My heart is for you and these children, that we get the opportunity to unlock them with accurate information and a plan, and for you to believe in yourself and your child. So we're continuing this journey. Check out, like, and subscribe to the video. Stay tuned, stay connected, stay involved. Let's continue this journey together. Next time in about 2 weeks, but we may adapt that. I usually do it on Thursday in 2 weeks, but I'll probably do it on Wednesday because of other scheduling things. So that'll be 13 days from today, Wednesday. Look for us to be live and do this video together. And we'll do part 5. And again, part 5 will be a surprise, but look forward to part 5. Thank you for being here today. Part 4, development and disorder. I encourage you, and we're going to end with a disclaimer today. This information provided is for your knowledge and information. It does not constitute medical advice. It is not a substitute for professional, accurate medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Seek the advice of your healthcare professional, and do not disregard any medical advice that you find necessary. Thank you for being here today. Be well, be blessed. We'll see you next time.